America's next air bet takes shape as Trump readies the F-47 against China's rising J-36 challenge. The US is scrambling to regain its edge as air dominance in the Pacific comes under growing pressure. As Xi's J-36 shakes up the contest, Washington is doubling down on the F-47 response. Trump appears to be preparing for a sixth-generation threat as the US refocuses on the China challenge after Taiwan doubts.
So let me first say on Taiwan, and I think I made this point myself, either on the trip in China or thereafter when we returned. There's been no change to U.S. policy towards Taiwan. We just had a massive arms sales, and it was so big and so noticeable that the Chinese became very aggressive about it in some of the incursions they undertook as a result of it.
The U.S. is reportedly pushing ahead with development of its next-generation air dominance fighter, the F-47. The aircraft is part of Washington's sixth-generation fighter program and is expected to eventually replace the F-22. The U.S. Air Force is seeking $5.03 billion for fiscal year 2027 to speed up development of Boeing's F-47. Defense Security Asia reported on June 2nd that the move points to an intensifying technological race. U.S. officials have said the first F-47 is already in production, with a first flight targeted for 2028. The American push comes as China's J-36 is drawing growing attention from defense analysts. China's J-36 is increasingly being portrayed as a possible challenge to long-standing U.S. air dominance. The emergence of the J-36 has added fresh urgency to America's next-generation fighter timeline. Analysts say the Pacific is becoming the central theater in the growing U.S.-China air power rivalry. The F-47 is intended to help the United States preserve its edge in a future high-end conflict in the Pacific. Reports suggest the J-36 could complicate U.S. freedom of action across the Western Pacific. Some analysis has suggested the J-36 may be designed to threaten U.S. bases and air operations around Guam. The competition between the F-47 and J-36 underscores the shift into the sixth-generation air combat era. This new air power race is centered on stealth, range, survivability, and long-distance strike capability. It also revolves around advanced sensors, data fusion, electronic warfare, and networked combat systems. Human-machine teaming is expected to become a major element of the next air power contest. The F-47 is being developed as part of a broader U.S. effort to deter China in the Pacific. The program reflects Washington's concern that China is rapidly narrowing the technological gap. The U.S. view is that future air dominance will require an entirely new generation of combat aircraft. The F-47 push is also intended to signal that the United States plans to stay ahead in the Pacific balance. The growing attention on the J-36 shows how seriously China's aviation advances are now being taken. These developments suggest that US-China competition is moving beyond the era of fifth-generation fighters. The next phase of that rivalry may be shaped by whichever side can dominate the battle space first. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on June 2nd that there has been no change in Washington's policy on Taiwan. Rubio told lawmakers that foreign policy often means choosing between two less-than-ideal options. He also argued that the United States remains the world's only global superpower and its most powerful country.
Sometimes in foreign policy, the choices are not between a good choice and a bad choice. It's between two less-than-ideal choices, and you're trying to figure out which one of these two choices is the one that is best for the United States and least harmful to our interests. And that plays out every single day. That said, we remain the world's sole global superpower, the most powerful country on earth. We have the largest economy. We have the most formidable and powerful military ever known to man, by the way. We now have in this hemisphere a coalition of friendly countries, over a dozen, who have aligned to work on not just the issues of security that we all have in common, but also economic prosperity that go hand in hand. It's an amazing story that basically, other than Nicaragua, other than Cuba, obviously other than Venezuela, it remains with some challenges, and of course Brazil, although they're in the midst of an election cycle, and to some extent the current government in Colombia as well, at least the president's been problematic. But generally speaking, it is now a region filled with American allies, American-friendly leaders, and an America-friendly direction. Now, obviously, we have to operationalize that into action after 20 years of neglect, in which China and other global powers have intruded in our Western Hemisphere to the detriment not just of American national interest, but to the detriment, in our view, of the people of those countries as well. And so let me first say on Taiwan, and I think I made this point myself, either on the trip in China or thereafter when we returned, there's been no change to U.S. policy towards Taiwan. I think there's, obviously the Chinese side would like to see a change in the verbiage, but no change has been made in that regard. We just had a massive arms sales, and it was so big and so noticeable that the Chinese became very aggressive about it in some of the incursions they undertook as a result of it. And as I said, it was more in one sale than we did in the entirety of the Biden administration, if I'm correct, and I think I am on that point. So, but the most important thing to understand is we want to see the status quo preserved, as is at this moment. That's our policy. That's what we've said. That's what we continue to say. It's a very, as you know, a very delicate relationship to balance. But our policy on Taiwan is not changing, and did not change on this trip. You know, for a long period of time, our relations with Armenia were quite stagnant, and in many cases, I would argue, almost non-existent. It has also reinvigorated that relationship between our two countries and allow us to explore opportunities in all sorts of other fields. So we're involved in that very heavily now. We literally just signed the agreement, and it will allow us to drive and hopefully incentivize U.S. private sector investment in this corridor to the benefit of American companies and American interests, but also to the benefit of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and other regional countries. I would also argue, by the way, and just to point out, and I don't mean this again, I think this is pretty well understood in the open source reporting, the Russians are less than happy about our engagement there. I think there's evidence that they would like the current president to lose his election as a result of this growing relationship with the United States. To be clear, we're not there to infringe on Armenian sovereignty. We're not asking them not to be friends with other countries. We just want to be able to have a relationship with them that's built not just on peace. Peace is important, but that's just the beginning. It's the economic opportunities that it provides. There are American companies and American workers that will benefit from it, but the Armenian people will be the ultimate beneficiaries of this corridor opening.
His remarks came after reports that the US and China had held maritime military safety talks. According to reports, Chinese and US military officials held maritime safety talks in Hawaii on May the 28th and 29th. The meeting marked the first formal round of military-to-military communication since Xi Jinping hosted Donald Trump, signaling a cautious attempt to reopen high-level defense channels. Senior U.S. officials from Indo-Pacific Command, the Pacific Fleet, U.S. Air Forces and the Coast Guard all attended the talks, underscoring Washington's multi-branch approach to maritime safety. China's PLA Navy said both sides conducted candid and constructive exchanges based on mutual respect, suggesting that the discussions directly addressed points of friction rather than avoiding them. Beijing explicitly linked the Hawaii talks to strategic understandings reached during the recent Xi-Trump summit, portraying them as a concrete follow-up to leaders-level diplomacy.